When I just turned 20, I received a wonderful surprise in the mail. A happy birthday message from my good friend May, as well as an invitation to her wedding in the coming week. May's father had gotten a new job out of town while we were both still in primary school, and she left together with the rest of her family to her dad's new workplace back then. Moving out of town practically meant disappearing forever in those days. So to teenage me, who had been granted newfound freedom by my parents, receiving word from a long-lost friend after almost a decade was akin to a miracle from the heavens. It was thus a no-brainer to accept her invitation. After sending my response in the mail, I immediately started making preparations for my trip. However, I didn't know where May had moved to, so it came as a complete shock to learn that she was now living way across the peninsula, on an island off the west coast called Penang to be exact. For someone who had barely traveled out of the state at the time, going to such a faraway place felt like I was going to a whole new country altogether. I was practically reeling in unbridled excitement the whole time I was packing up my bags and counting the small stacks of notes stashed beneath my mattress. Coincidentally, my brother was heading to the capital on the same day I was planning to leave. He offered to give me a ride to Paduria, the city's main bus terminal, where I could catch a long-distance bus up north and hop onto a ferry across to the island. He was so generous with his offer that I wondered aloud if he had taken the wrong medicine in the morning. Then, he showed me the low fuel light on the dashboard, and I could only sigh as I coughed up the petrol money. We reached the outskirts of the capital just as the sun was about to set. My brother promptly dumped me and my luggage outside Paduria bus terminal before screeching away in his beat-up Toyota. He got stuck in one of the city's infamous jams in the next moment, but I digress. There was no way to buy a ticket in advance, so I was praying like mad that a kind soul would sell me a last-minute ticket to my destination. To my dismay, however, I soon found out that past evening time, the ticket counters in Paduria had already closed up shop, and only the ulad, slang for ticket touts, translated literally to mean worm, were selling what I needed. It was clear as a red flag that these guys were no kind souls. But being tired and desperate, I begrudgingly paid triple the market price for my ticket on a Penang-bound bus, which was due to arrive at 8:15 p.m. at platform 10. Thankfully, it seemed that a little bit of luck was on my side, because the bus really did pull over at the platform 15 minutes past 8. Said bus had no decals or identification whatsoever, though, which left me wondering what dubious, unscrupulous company operated this shitbox. 10, maybe 15 other passengers boarded the bus with me, most of them blue-collar workers returning home after a long day. A stout, middle-aged man climbed into the driver's seat, flung his cigarette butt out the window, and took a glance at everyone seated on the bus. "Anyone going beyond Ipoh?" he asked in a gruff voice. "State your destinations." Bemused, I raised my hand. A lady sitting across from me and another 2 passengers at the back also raised theirs. The 2 rear passengers were going to Taiping, the next major city after Ipoh, while the lady's destination was Butterworth, where I was headed for as well. The driver shamelessly charged the 4 of us an extra $5 for some bullshit long-distance fee. After a heated exchange, the 2 Taiping passengers grabbed their bags and furiously stormed off the bus. I was honestly too exhausted to change buses on a dime, so I paid the nonsense extra charge, and so did the lady. We left Paduria uneventfully after that. At some time past 10, we stopped a street away from the bus terminal in Ipoh, because the bus we were on was unlicensed and probably street illegal. Everyone else except for the lady and I alighted. As a result, the bus became a lot quieter, which gave me a chance to catch some sleep. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when I woke up from my nap, but I could feel a throbbing pain in my head from resting against the stiff headrest for too long, and my stomach was rumbling. Looking out of the windows only revealed the outline of dark treetops against the pale, moonless sky. The lady beside me seemed to be asleep, so I asked the driver if we were approaching Taipang soon. "Left already," he grunted in response. "We should be crossing the border into Penang soon." I thanked him before returning to my seat. After some time had passed, however, it didn't look as though our surroundings had changed much from before. I was starting to feel really hungry, and regretting not buying any snacks before boarding the bus, so I decided to ask the driver again. "We'll reach the border at any moment," he muttered under his breath, as if trying to ignore my question. Feeling a little weirded out, I went back to my seat and tried to quell my ravenous hunger with the remaining water in my bottle. Yet, not a minute later, my stomach was growling loudly and angrily again, and this time I had no more water left to quench my thirst. There was still no sign of civilization either, so I anxiously wanted to ask the driver if we were on the correct road at all. But for some odd reason, my body felt super heavy all of a sudden. It was as if an unseen force was forcing my body into the seat, and I couldn't even lift myself onto my feet, no matter how hard I tried. Just as panic began to rise in my gut, a conspicuous yellow glow in the distance ahead caught my attention suddenly. The brightly lit silhouette of a roadside stand soon revealed itself ahead of us. Colorful banners and lights adorned its wooden walls, and under a large canopy between two large trees was 2 rows of tables packed with customers. A large sign advertising delicious satay and drinks hung from the corrugated iron roof of the stand. And sure enough, the mouth-watering aroma of grilled meat wafted through the open windows as the bus approached the stand. It was no doubt a jarring sight to behold in the dead of night, especially when we had been traveling on a pitch-black road for so long. But I was more than relieved to find a welcome respite from my empty stomach. The driver seemingly thought the same as I did, because he switched the hazard lights on and steered towards the road shoulder. All of a sudden, the lady beside me started shouting at the driver, "What are you doing? Don't stop the bus." "We're taking a short break," the driver retorted as he pulled the handbrake. "Please, you have to listen to me. This is not a good place to stop at," she pleaded, her eyes frantically darting between the roadside stand and the driver's annoyed face. "That's not what you think it is. We must leave immediately." Her protests fell on deaf ears, however. With a roll of his eyes, the driver jumped off and made a dash towards the stand, where the vendor was gesturing at him with a friendly wave. By then, I was so famished too that I was practically ready to pry the window off of its frame just to get the savory food faster. But 2 desperate arms abruptly held me back from rushing down the aisle to the open doors. "Don't," the lady screamed at me. "You'll die if you go there." Her maniac screaming momentarily snapped me out of a horrible daze of hunger and insanity that had overwhelmed my mind. Staggering backwards into my seat, I blinked and gawked at her face. "What's wrong, lady? Take a closer look." She pointed a shaky finger at the roadside stand. "There's so many people. But do you see any cars parked by the roadside?" Her question sent a literal chill down my spine. I turned my gaze to the windows, and just as the lady pointed out, there were no other vehicles around except for the bus that we were on. It was then that the illusion was broken before my very eyes. The customers sitting at the tables were nothing more than solidified shadows and ghostly wisps, their conversations in a strange, deeply unnatural language I'd never heard of. The words rolling off their tongues made with sounds no human could possibly make or comprehend. But worst of all, I realized that the vendor, who now appeared to be a creepy amalgamation of human and indescribable demonic features had their eyes fixated on me. In the split second that we made some semblance of eye contact, I swore I saw a crooked grin spread across its hellish face. Letting out an alarmed cry, I ducked beneath the window and trembled violently. "What the hell is that?" "Most probably Jinn," the lady whispered next to my ear. "It's angry because I broke its spell, and now it's trying to exert its influence over your mind again. Cover your ears and don't look at it directly." I was already scared shitless at this point, so I followed what she said without a single complaint. "Lady, how did you know?" "I've traveled between Taiping and Butterworth many times during the day, and I don't remember seeing any road sign satay stands along this stretch of road." Her voice was trembling slightly. In fact, the land that this road sits on is known to be dirty, so no one would ever dare set up shop here. Just at that moment, a loud grunt came from the front of the bus. We both started in fright, and the lady nervously raised her head to catch a glimpse of the unwelcome guest. "You're back." Her voice trailed off as she stared at the driver with wide, terrified eyes. Noticing that her face had gotten deathly pale, I mustered the courage to ask her what was the matter. "You can't see." Her gaze was still riveted to the driver, who had returned to the wheel and resumed driving. I glanced at the driver, but try as I might, I couldn't sense that anything about him had changed. "That thing, it feeds on strong emotions," the lady continued, her words not quite making sense to me. "And the driver is full of negative emotions." Streetlights suddenly flickered into view ahead of us. We were finally entering the border town into Penang. I let out a sigh of relief and slumped into my seat. But to my shock and utter bewilderment, the lady grabbed her belongings and ran to the doors in a mad rush. "Let me off," she cried, frantically banging her fists on the door shutters. "Stop the bus. I want to get off." Even the driver blinked in surprise. "We haven't arrived at Butterworth yet." The lady looked at him as if she was staring at a ghost. "I don't care. Please, stop the bus." The driver shot her a disgusted look. Nevertheless, he pressed the brake and pulled over by the town's main road. Before the doors opened, the lady caught my frightened stare and shook her head wildly. "If you value your life, don't stay on this bus any longer than you have to." Her ominous warning quite literally made me sick to my stomach. I was seriously contemplating if I should also bail out, but it was still some time before dawn. Taxis would be a nightmare to get a hold of at such a time. Not wanting to be stranded in the middle of nowhere, I could only watch as the lady vanished in the distance behind and braced myself for the worst. But perhaps luck really was on my side after all, because the bus reached Butterworth bus terminal at the break of dawn somewhat in one piece. Shaken and on the verge of a mental breakdown, I cried when my feet finally touched solid ground and I spotted the ferry to Penang Island, waiting by the sun-kissed dock. Thanks to May and her family, my short stay in Penang was nothing short of fun and memorable. After the wedding, I returned home via train. I really wasn't in the mood for another long-distance bus ride. I honestly have no idea what happened to that particular bus driver, but a few months later, news about an accident that happened on the then newly opened Penang Bridge reached my town. The details are a little fuzzy, but I vaguely remember it was about a long-distance bus suddenly losing control on the bridge during a thunderstorm and crashing straight into the waters below. Luckily, a fishing boat was nearby, and all of the passengers on board were saved, except for the driver.